Hi, I am Elysium and welcome to my channel. So last week we had a look at some of the strange things that have happened over the last couple of years in order to contextualize the utopian development in this crazy new world that we're living in. We dropped a massive lie into last week's video and asked you to spot it and drop it in the comments. And you know what? Only one person spotted it, and it was, of course, Mel. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who gave us a comment and a like and subscribed as well. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you. So this week's video, we are going to be talking about the Utopian Laws. These are the foundation principles that have guided us in the development of the philosophy and the technology. And thankfully, I have someone to help me discuss this because I'm not sure if my voice is going to last until the end of the video. So please welcome Andrew. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're here to help.
It's good to see you, and Merry Christmas to you, Elysium, and loving the hair. I feel a little bit upstaged, but yeah.
Thank you so much, and Merry Christmas to you too. And I also love your shirt. Let me see, hang on. Are they Christmas foxes on there?
They are indeed. You take a fox, you add a Christmas tree and a few snowflakes, job done.
Well, I mean, they do make amazing biscuits. So.
And mints. Other mints are available.
And biscuits. Brilliant. So let's dive straight in with a look at the first law. I love this one because it describes the whole thing. This one is very important. It is, number one, that everyone is a store of value, and that value is measured in energy.
Absolutely. We can't even claim to have come up with this law. It's basically nature, and we can actually demonstrate through Utopian that energy transfer takes place in everything that we do. And energy can either be potential or it can be expended. And we build this wealth of energy inside ourselves from the moment we're born. We're learning, we're growing, we're getting stronger, and we're gaining experience, we're establishing skills and talents. And these are things that we can then take as potential energy, and we can use. We can be creative, we can be collaborative within our communities, and that allows us to expend that energy, create some.
And actually, we've got an amazing clip from the very wonderful YouTuber, Dr. Yuri Shashfort.
Hi, I'm Yuri.
Who has kindly agreed that we can use this clip and talk about it. Now, we saw it last week, I think, in his video on the creation of debt in medieval Europe. So let's have a look at this clip. It talks about how debt began, but then we'll discuss how it relates to the Utopian law.
Let's go to late medieval Europe, where there were two emerging economic regions, Flanders and northern Italy. At the time, both were dominated by rivaling princes, dukes and kings, which each minted their own gold and silver coins. There you have it, commodity money was more important. But hold on, metal lovers, because much of the localized production and trade was done without money altogether. The scene is a quaint village in northern Italy. The actors are a farmer and a hunter. The problem is seasonality. After all, the farmer can only produce crops in the harvest season, while the hunter can hunt all year round. Now both the hunter and farmer like a balanced diet. What's more, the farmer wants to eat some meat now so that he has the energy to harvest later. The solution is obviously debt. The hunter agrees to provide the farmer with meat now if the farmer promises the hunter plenty of crops after the harvest. This promise of future payment in crops is credit, or in other words, Debt. Notice 3 key points about this local credit. First, it can be created out of thin air and similarly will disappear into thin air after the farmer has harvested his crops and given a share to the hunter. After all, this credit is a promise. No need to save money or metals first. People can just make and fulfill promises freely. Second, credit can be created exactly where it is needed, to suit the local economic needs of the farmer and the hunter. Finally, this type of credit clearly promotes economic activity. It helps the farmer produce more crops, and it helps both the farmer and the hunter to achieve a balanced diet. Now, where the barter system runs into trouble with dividing units and carrying around a lot of goods, a local credit system runs into trouble whenever economic activity expands beyond where people know each other and therefore know whether to trust each other. And with international trade expanding in late medieval Europe, this was quickly turning into a big problem.
I think the first and most interesting thing is that if you take utopian law, and particularly that first law, but some of the other laws that we'll be looking at too, we don't have debt. And the reason we don't have debt is because what we're actually seeing in that video is very interesting. We're seeing an exchange of energy, which is what we were talking about a moment ago as being the first utopian law. So you have the hunter, he expends energy, the skills to hunt and bring in some food, and he actually gives that energy to the farmer. The farmer eats that energy and stores it. And he uses that energy through the winter to continue to be strong, to live, to exist. And then he uses that energy, he converts that energy using his expertise as a farmer to plant his crops, to harvest his crops. And then he takes what he's grown, the vegetables that he's grown, and he gives them to the hunter. The hunter eats those vegetables, so he is consuming the energy that's been created and expended by the farmer. And the whole cycle begins again. The energy that the farmer is taking from those vegetables, he's able to then go and do some more hunting, and it goes around in a cycle. So we're not actually seeing this creation of debt. We're not seeing a debt that appears from nowhere and disappears to somewhere. We're actually seeing energy being converted between the participants within the play.
Absolutely that. And because we've got the technology to store the information on how that energy has already been expanded, we don't need to live in a system that relies on debt. And although I do wholeheartedly believe that it has a function in the world that we live in, it also causes a lot of problems. And so there we go. The utopian system exists without debt in it. Amazing. Okay, it leads in nicely to the next law. Unrealized energy is the potential of an individual within the mFabric according to their stored value. And I think we spoke about this a few weeks ago, Andrew, when we talked about how it is possible to buy gym equipment and have it sitting in a box and not do anything with it, and obviously not reap any rewards from it.
Yeah, I know that one from experience, but it's absolutely true. We all have abilities, all of us, no matter what they might be. We have experience, we have skills, we have the ability to build or be creative, be collaborative, be compassionate, and you know, that energy might just be simply that. It might just be being compassionate. It might be being kind. But ultimately, until we actually expend that energy, until we actually do something with our capacity, with our ability to do something, it is just potential energy. So we all have that potential energy. That's all this law is saying. We have that potential energy. We have the ability to expend it. But until we do, it's just potential. And it's the same with your gym equipment.
Hey, don't blame me. You've just said you've got some in a box as well.
Well, it is true.
Well, you know what? How about we make a New Year's resolution?
Sounds good.
Oh my goodness. We've got to stick to it now. We've just done it on camera. Okay. Now, number 3 is that energy may be expended by an individual by actively engaging within the mFabric. Leads in from number 1 and number 2. We're talking about engagement the difference between groups and communities and inactivity versus activity?
Yeah, so all we're really saying there is that we've got the ability to use the energy. So we talked in law 2 about having the potential. So what law 3 is saying, we can go that step further and we can use that energy to be creative, to be collaborative, to be kind, to build communities. And that's really all this law is telling us.
And engagement is the name of the game, isn't it? I mean, like the algorithms that you have written to make sure that engagement is really part of the technology.
Engagement's hugely vital because, and we've even said this in the last 2 weeks, I think, if you take a group of people and they just sit together in a room and do nothing, and they don't engage with each other, they're not a community, they're just a group of people. But if you take a group of people and you actually get them engaging and talking to one another and collaborating with one another and creating with one another, then what you actually have is a community. You have a group of people with a common goal working towards whatever that common goal might be. And, you know, excitingly, we've seen this with Scribble already. You know, we're only a couple of weeks in, and we're already seeing amazing levels of engagement with people coming in and chatting and creating and being collaborative, and it's quite wonderful. And that is the true essence of a community.
Well, hang on a minute, because this links into the next law. And I know we've got an example of how this has been happening on Scribble with the haikus. So number 4 is, by expanding energy, an individual's store of value will grow, because energy attracts energy.
Yeah, so there are a couple of interesting things about this law. The first is about presence, and it's no coincidence that our algorithm works around metric points, which we call TSOP, or total state of presence. Because when we first started creating Utopian, we were looking at the fact that the more presence you have, the more things you can attract in. If I have a presence in the community and people are coming in and looking at around the community to find a specific type of person to help them with something, the more presence I have, the more likely I am to be noticed.
Hang on a minute, let me just check. You're not talking about Christmas presents, are you?
No, not at all. But let's take an example. So in a coaching environment, for example, if I have a community of coaches and I have, I don't know, let's say 2 people who are absolutely perfect for what I'm looking for in a coach, and I go to the profile of the first one and they're not really present. They've created a profile, but they're not really doing anything. And then I go to the profile of a second person. I can see that they're doing things in social media. I can see they've got things in the library. I can see that they've been publishing left, right, and center. And I can see they've got a real presence across the community that's been created for those coaches. So as that person has a much greater presence, I'm far more likely to notice them, and I'm far more likely to give them work. And as a result, my energy has been attracted to their energy, because the stronger the presence somebody has, the greater their gravitational pull. That doesn't work just for individuals, that works for communities as a whole. And, you know, we talk about this whole gestalt existence, and I think that we'll be talking about that more in Law 10. So I won't be going into that too much right now, but effectively, we also talk about this energy transfer between the utopian universe, or the mFabric, as we call it, and the outer layers. So the outer layers are the outer social layer and the outer commercial layer. And the outer social layer is basically all of the social media channels that we know exist, so Twitter and so on. And what we actually saw a few days ago was an example of what we call communing, this exchange of energy outward from a utopian community out to those outer layers, and that being found by people who have been brought back in, and that they have then interacted together to create something greater. And then it's gone back out to Twitter again, and it's come back in with even more people, and it's grown and it's grown and it's grown. So we're seeing an energy exchange there. We're seeing energy attracting energy. People are pushing energy out. It's creating something. That energy is coming back in, being attracted. It's growing into something bigger through collaboration, through creativity. And so you start getting this exchange going backwards and forwards.
It's such a powerful tool, and it really shows how that principle of utopian works. It really does work. It's amazing. So, number 5, all energy that may be entered into the platform will dissipate over time. This is not in direct contradiction with the law of physics that says that all energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's actually about how the energy changes shape, changes form, just like a fire.
Yeah, it is entirely about conversion. So in reality, what we're saying is we're not saying that energy is destroyed, it doesn't disappear, but expended energy can't stay expended energy. If you don't continue to push that energy out, it turns back into potential energy. I'm not doing anything, it's potential energy. I create something, it's being expended. I stop creating something, it goes back to being potential. And you give an excellent example with the fire. If you put wood on the fire burns. If you stop fueling that fire, then the fire dies down and eventually it stops burning altogether. And we see this in communities a lot. And we've talked about it before. There are 2 examples. One example is where you have a community where you create everything that's there, the framework's there, it's absolutely perfect. You have a bunch of people join, but they just create profiles and then do nothing. So effectively, you've got a whole bunch of people there not expending any energy. It's all potential. So your community continues to be a potential community. It never becomes a community. The other example that we see quite often is you get a community, you get this initial rush of excitement as people come in and they get engaged, but then they don't really get the thing that they expected to get from the community. They stop expending the energy. And that's an example of expended energy turning back into potential energy. So they draw back in, they don't go to the community anymore, their profile's there, but they're not there, they're not visiting, they're not doing anything. So as a result, what happens is that all of that energy that was there in an expended state goes back to being potential. And again, your community has gone from being this thriving environment to being just the potential to be a thriving environment. And we even tie our salt and pepper currency into this. So what happens is if you're less present, your currency slowly shrinks as well, because within our economy, what we're basically saying is if you're not present, if you're not doing things, if you're not expending energy within the community, you don't need currency because you're not actually present and doing something within that environment. So everything, the harder you push outward, the harder you're more creative, the more energy you're pushing in, the more you get out. The less you do, the less you get out.
And actually leads on nicely to the next law, number 6. Energy cannot be taken from the mFabric without first putting energy in.
Yeah, so if you think about Newton's law, and an object will not change its motion unless a force acts on it, what we're saying is that in the utopian fabric, nothing will change unless you act on it. So you can't expect we have that knowledge base, that information base, which grows from people being creative and putting knowledge into it. Well, that knowledge base won't grow if people don't actually put things into it. We have the libraries. The library won't actually increase with what's in the library. You won't get additional books or videos or podcasts or whatever you're collecting in that library unless people are actually being creative and putting something into it. In terms of collaboration, if you don't have people being collaborative and doing things together and being co-creative, then nothing actually changes. So you have to put something in to get something out.
Absolutely. It's a bit like growing a seed, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you've got such an enormous amount of potential in such a tiny space. And, you have to plant your seed and water it and nurture it, or nothing's going to happen. You'll just end up with a seed, maybe in a pot, maybe still in the packet. So there's another analogy for us there. Okay, law number 7. The mFabric, or any aspect within that space, may exist an unlimited number of times, connected to the same individual, but in a different state. So this is the concept of the mFabric, being a multiverse or a mmFabric?
Yeah, so this is almost utopian gone quantum, but what we're basically saying is that we don't exist in our physical being in a single way. We're lots of things. You're a mother, you're a wife, you're an entrepreneur, you're lots of things, and you don't tie yourself to any one particular label. You exist at the same time in the same space, but as many things. And yet, in most cases, digitally, when I join some kind of community or platform, that platform or community tends to be specific to an individual thing. It tends to be, this is a community for anglers, this is a community for writers, etc. It might be, in some cases, such as Twitter, that yes, you can be all of these different things, but you very rarely are all of those things at once. You tend to brand yourself to one thing or to another. Or to another. The thing with the utopian fabric is that you can be a member of lots of different communities, and those communities link together through what we call the skill card, or through the master seed, and we can actually arrange the utopian mFabric in any way. So its default way, the default way to look at any fabric is by relevance according to a subject. So a writer's community, a coaching community, an artist's community, for examples. But it might be that you arrange the fabric by spoken language. You might do it by geography, what countries you live in. You might do it by secondary interest. You might do it by hobbies, pastimes. You might do it by any means, which means I can have all the facets of my existence, but I can ensure that I only show those parts or those facets of my existence that are relevant to any specific community I'm in, but I can actually lay that out in any way that I wish. So I can say, okay, in a writer's community, I'm only going to put anything that's relevant to being a writer. And in the coaching community, I'm only going to show anything that's relevant to being involved with coaching. But actually, I'm also going to say that I speak English. And if I want to, I could actually show the fabric to show that I have a geographical relevance rather than a relevance in terms of being a coach or being a writer.
And we are all multifaceted beings, so why not allow for that crossover to exist?
100%, yeah, 100%, because we don't exist in a single facet physically. We shouldn't do digitally.
So I'm going to tie Law 8 and Law 9 together, because I think that these are best represented when we're thinking about trees. Have you seen that documentary about how the trees in a forest, underneath the forest, there is a network of roots, mycelium, which connects the whole thing together? It's fantastic, fascinating. So law number 8 is that the utopian fabric expands outward from a single point of knowledge, extending new pathways through which energy may be accumulated and spent via nodes and clusters, so to increase scope, expand bandwidth, and improve diversity.
Yeah, so if you think of the Big Bang, you think expanding out from the center, you think about your forest, and they're putting out their roots to find more nutrients and all the things that the forest needs to exist. What you basically have is a hive of communities that are bringing together quality data, and the central point of information is being able to say, right, okay, well, we've got a gap in information here, so it can grow a pathway out here, and that can become a bunch of communities that bring that content in. And the beauty of the way that the pathways work within the mFabric is that they are humanized sources of information that are entirely created through human energy, human endeavor, human collaboration, compassion, creativity. So it's basically all of our energies working together. Instead of spending money and time trying to artificially, synthetically create human intelligence, we're taking all of the human intelligence that we can muster together, and we're giving governance to that human intelligence, and we're cleaning and making sure that that information and content is clean. But we're also saying, okay, what we want to do is we want to gather as much information as we can. So if there's a gap here, let's grow another community to fill that gap. If there's a gap here, let's fill that gap by growing a community here. And all the time, these tendrils, these roots are stretching out to find more nutrients, more energy, because the energy comes from human beings. And human beings are feeding that energy back into the network and putting that information. And remember, it works both ways. Remember our example in the earlier law. Those human beings are exchanging energy all the time with the external layers, pushing energy out to the commercial layer, pushing energy out to the external social layer. Energy is coming back in the shape of more people, more collaboration, more creativity, which gets pushed back out again, pushing it out to those outer layers, and it comes back in again, and it's just exchange, 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 exchange. And so it's pushing outwards constantly.
That links into law number 9. Knowledge as energy always cascades inwards from a point of focus and relevance within a node to a greater sphere of wisdom as a single point of knowledge within the master seed. It's exactly what you were just saying.
Exactly that. So you've got this exchange here, push out, pull in, push out, pull in. That's your energy that's growing more and more people into the communities, more and more collaboration, more and more creativity. And then that collaboration and creativity is growing knowledge. It's growing not just knowledge, but it might be growing potatoes, our favorite subject. It might be writing books. It might be coaching services. It might be whatever. And that is all then being pushed back into this central point so that anybody, anywhere in the network can pull it back out again as they need it. So this person over here needs potatoes. Boom, there they are. This person over here is looking for a book about whatever. There it is. This person needs coaching. There it is. And you can therefore flow anything to anywhere within the fabric through that central point of knowledge.
That's incredible. Okay, the last law. It's also very, very important. And we've mentioned it a number of times. Law number 10 is the whole of anything is greater than its parts.
Yeah, so the way I normally demonstrate this is through Gestalt psychology. And one of the best examples I've ever seen of that is a paragraph of text, but with all the words arranged all over the place and in the wrong order. And then over here, you've got all the same words, but they're in the right order and they're properly formed sentences. So they're all the same words, but over here, I can understand it and read it and know what it means. And over here, it's all over the place and I don't really get it. If you think about a community in the same way, I might have 100 people who are experts in a specific thing, and they're spread all over social media, and they're all yelling at the tops of their voices, but they're only yelling from their own perspective. So they're all individual. If you look over here, I've got 100 people in a community and they're all yelling together. So you've got a collective energy pushing outwards, pulling back in. What we're actually saying there is that whole thing about Gestalt being the sum of its parts being greater as a whole. So the whole is greater than the sum of its parts is the way I should have said it. And in very simple terms, in using our 100 people against 100 people example, what we're saying is 100 people shouting together in unison make a hell of a lot more noise than 100 people all yelling separately from different places all over the world.
Now, I can actually give a real life example of this because people might not know this, but I'm actually a choir mistress. And I can tell you that the power behind the choir, the voices all singing in unison together is absolutely phenomenal. And yes, those individuals may have wonderful voices as soloists, but together there is just something incredible that happens when they sing in one. Okay.
And the best time of year to be thinking about choirs.
I know, right? Although I'm not singing any carols.
I was about to say, I don't think you'll be singing Silent Night tonight, at least.
I'm really not. Okay, now that brings us to the end of our discussion about the utopian laws. Now, if you want to have a look at them in more detail, I will stick them in the description below so that you can see them. And as always, we are more than happy to discuss anything that you have seen in this video or any other, or in fact, pretty much anything in life. And you can get in touch with us in all of the usual ways. There is a link in the description to video chat so that we can have a literally video chat if you'd like to do that. And you'll also find links to our social media accounts below as well. Andrew, last week's massive lie.
Can't remember what it was. Oh yes, I remember. Yes, I didn't actually create a website for potatoes, although I actually possibly would if I was asked to do so, especially if it was enough sacks. Yeah, why not? If there was enough potatoes to get me through the winter, go for it.
So you heard it here first. This man will work for food.
Always for food. Many people who know me on Twitter know that food is one of my favorite subjects.
So next week, we have another fascinating video in which we are going to describe our native currency, salt and pepper. So I'm looking forward to talking about that with you. Are you going to come along next week, Andrew?
I am, and I'll be fresh from Christmas with all my presents unwrapped. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Excellent. Is that your total state of presents?
Yeah, I've got to expend some energy to open those presents. So I will convert that energy into seeing what's inside the packet, and then I will use energy playing with whatever lovely toys I get.
So before I go, there is just enough time for me to remind you to like, subscribe and share. And remember, if you enjoy this channel, don't tell me, tell your friends. I'll see you next time.